Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Michalisburg, tuka mango. Ko Val, tuka awa. No te makamaka hura aho. Ko te mana tai tai hoko hoko takutari. Ko Paper tuka whānau. Ko Tammy tuka ingoa. Tina koutou, tina koutou, tina koutou katoa. It is no secret that when women get into investing, we tend to outpace our male counterparts. But yet there remain many perceived and real barriers that prevent us from getting into the market. And what we want to do today as part of International Women's Day 2023 is to spend some time talking to 4 real phenomenal women in the area of finance, aiming to help break down those barriers a bit more so that we can experience our own form of financial freedom. But before I get going, I'm just going to touch on a little bit of housekeeping, as one does. The bathroom facilities are out the black panel doors and turn right. In an emergency, the fire evacuation stairwell is underneath the escalators, under there, and back of the room through the single black exit door and through the glass frosted door. Generator staff will guide you out the room. The emergency meeting point is downtown car park. Turn right once you exit the PwC tower. Okay, so just a note on the format of today. Today is going to be a facilitated round table discussion, even though we are in a row. It's going to be followed by a Q&A, and we really welcome and want you to participate in the Q&A. And then because you've been so good and you've sat through it all, there will be lunch and networking afterwards. So before we get things really going, I just want to take time to welcome and introduce to you our Chief Executive Officer, Samantha Barris. She's going to set the stage for us, and we look forward to getting this going. So Samantha, thank you very much. Sure.
So, enga mana, enga maunga, enga hoe whā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No inga rangi o kutupuna. No reira ka mihi ki te whenua o Greenwich me te awa Thames. Ko Ngāti Rarana ki te patonga te iwi. I whanau mai o I ranana, engari I te wai tamariki ana aho I tupu ake o ki Ōtotahi. Ko te whanganui altara taku kāinga noho nai nei. Ko Samantha Barris taku ingoa, ko taku mahi ki te mana tatai hoko hoko, ko te mana whakahaere. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka hurio ki te reo ingarehi. Kia ora, everyone. As Chief Executive of the FMA, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you here to celebrate International Women's Day. We've brought together some of New Zealand's top finance personalities to create a kōrero for women's financial well-being. And it's my privilege to welcome Mary Holm, Frances Cook, Kahukura Boynton, and Sarah Kelsey, 4 powerful wahine who have created a safe space for women to grow their financial know-how. You've just heard me deliver my mihi. By way of a very brief, loose translation, I was born in southeast London to a very working-class British family, and we moved to Aotearoa when I was a little girl in pursuit of a better life. And although I spent time away from New Zealand with my career and raising my family, I'm loving being back and once again making it my home. It's my job today to briefly set the scene before we dive into our panel discussion. So here we are, we're living in the golden age of .com technology with fingertip access to knowledge, and it sounds like being a golden ticket to life and financial well-being. But recent FMA research is not alone in finding that men are still more likely to know where to start, are more confident in their financial knowledge, and are just more comfortable investing in things like shares, term deposits, and managed funds. And this is just one survey in a myriad of surveys over the years that have consistently shown that women have significantly lower levels of financial confidence, knowledge and participation when compared to men. That being said, the walls and roadblocks are falling. It's not entirely a kind of a story of doom. And the inspiring women on our panel are a real testament to that. Here at the FMA, we pulse check the nation biannually, and each time we've seen an increase in female financial confidence. And I take heart in knowing that we are witnessing the dial move in real time. This means that the work that we're doing today and that of the women who came before us is working. We just need to keep on doing it because the work is not yet done. And at the FMA, we have a bold ambition that more New Zealanders than ever believe that the financial system is working well for them. And the theme of this year's International Women's Day is to #embrace equity. And we know that in order to thrive, our financial system must live, breathe this ethos and support women's economic empowerment and financial inclusion. It's no secret that historically women have been removed from capital. Even today, 1 in 8 women globally do not have access to financial services. That's a tragedy. But economic empowerment isn't just about reducing this number. It's about women feeling confident managing their finances, building financial security, and importantly, increasing their financial influence. By being here today, you're already likely to be well on the path to financial empowerment. And this is a fantastic position to be in. And I just want to encourage all of you in that journey. And I know I'm still on it myself. So have money conversations with your mum, your auntie, your sister, your friends and colleagues, because the more we can break down the barriers to financial empowerment, the more we will all thrive in all areas of our lives. So thank you very much. It's delightful to be here today. And I would like to hand back to Tammy.
Thank you, Sam. And I think what's central to what Sam has just said is that whole thing around the positive note. That yes, while there are still barriers, so much is happening, change is happening. And the FMA, we do see it when we do those biennial surveys. So I think there's a really important message of hope. And on that message of hope, what I'd like to do is I'd like to please invite our 4 speakers onto the stage. Please will you join me? I bet you all thought the table was staying. Yeah. Okay. Before I go any further, just a very important note on financial advice. Today, what we will be doing is we will be sharing information, insights, and thoughts, but this is not financial advice. We encourage you, should you want financial advice, please to speak to a licensed financial provider, alternatively your bank or your KiwiSaver provider. Now we've got the big stuff out the way. So as Samantha said, she introduced these 4 exceptional women, and I feel like I'm saying exceptional a lot, but I'm just wanting to just give 1 or 2 lines on each of these women. First of all, Sarah Kelsey. First of all, Sarah Kelsey is a very successful podcaster. She has the Project. It aims to have open conversations about money while getting people really excited. I found quite recently a very interesting set that Sarah did, and that was when she went traveling and offered an unflinching look at the highs and lows of being a solo digital nomad. Next I have is Frances Cook. Frances Cook is a self-confessed recovered financial hot mess, and I can really relate to that. She spends all her time now saving people from making the same mistakes. She also has a successful podcast, Cooking the Books, and she's a regular business desk column. Next I have is Kahukura Boynton. She's also known as the Māori Millionaire, and this woman has a lot going on. She's studying law full-time, and while she is studying law, she is also an entrepreneur, content creator, and on her way to making her first million by 25. A very inspirational woman, if there is. The last person I need to introduce is Mary Holmes, who is definitely a New Zealand icon. She is described as New Zealand's most trusted financial expert. She's been appointed Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit. She is also the author of best-selling books and has a regular column in the New Zealand Herald. As you can see, true, really exceptional woman with us today. So I want to start off. What we hear often is people reflecting on their financial journey. And we're all on a journey. And if your journey is a bit like mine, there seem to be more marshland and potholes than nice, smooth times. But what I want to do is I actually want to hear more about your financial journey. I'm interested in hearing what are some of the highs, what are some of the lows, and some of the tips that you could offer us. So I'm going to start with Te Kahukura. Looking back on your financial journey, what was your aha moment? What was that aha moment, that game-changing moment?
Kia ora everyone. I guess my aha moment was when I was at university and I needed to pay for my rent and I had no job. I didn't have a car, so I couldn't get a job because they wanted a car. But I managed to start tutoring maths and I saved enough money to pay my rent on time, not get kicked out. And then from there, I worked on building my own personal finances, my emergency fund, and now I'm able to have money to fall back on when unexpected costs come up, which is a really cool thing for me. And so my tip is to always have an emergency fund,
Yes.
no matter what. If you're in a relationship especially, I think having an emergency fund is really important to be able to exit situations or whatever it may be. But emergency funds are my number one tip.
Yeah. That emergency fund really resonates with me. Years ago, I got told to have a freedom fund. It wasn't necessarily called freedom, but there was F involved. And that whole thing, and it's always stood me in very good stead because that whole fund has always given me the power to stay or go. And I think as women, to have that power is incredible. And that's a little pot of money for you. It gives you your power. So yeah, completely resonates with me. Mary, moving on to you. Looking back at your financial journey so far, again, what was your aha moment, that game-changing moment?
Kia ora, everybody. I think learning about index funds way back in the 1970s when they were actually invented, and I lived in Chicago at the time where it was all sort of happening, and invested money in index funds then. And when I moved from America back to Australia and New Zealand, I left my pension money that I'd earned in America in index funds and just left it there. And it's grown incredibly over that time. Yeah, because they're low fees and you get wide diversification. Many of you here will know about them and some won't, but if you look on my website or whatever, there's more about it there. Yeah.
I think it's an important message of time in the market and not timing the market that I think is so important. Sarah, tell us, what is a mistake that you've learned from, and what is the best money tip you've ever had?
I think a big mistake I learned from was just not considering the future version of myself. And so one way I didn't consider that was in university, just spending my course-related costs and what's that one? Living costs on, actually it was a deposit to a trip to South Africa that I didn't end up going on and didn't get that back. Anyway, spent it on a lot of things that didn't make sense. And I think that was definitely where I learned, okay, it's important to start recognizing what I want in the future. And a big part of that was habits and patterns and picking up what those trends were through time. And both in my personal development and my personal financial development, I learned that picking up my own behaviors is really important. So expense tracking was a huge part of that and understanding where my money was going. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about budgets is they're supposed to be restricting your money, but actually what they should be doing is just telling you where your money is going and helping you to pick up those behaviors and those patterns. And if I had known that earlier, then probably life may look different now. I'm not sure. I'd have more on my investment account, that's for sure. But yeah.
I love that you said about budgeting, and it makes us face the reality. I always describe budgeting can feel a bit like getting on the scale. You're faced with the reality of the situation. I look at my scale often enough and I'm like, oh, no. So sometimes can feel the same towards budget. So yeah, I feel that. And Frances, what is one mistake you've learned from, and again, your money tip?
So a mistake I learned from was a recent one. As Mary mentioned, fabulous index funds, and that's always been something that I've really recommended to people, and it's been my main strategy. And then I just kept seeing people talk about crypto, and I didn't invest in crypto. I invested crypto adjacent. So my problem with crypto is that it doesn't do anything right. It's not a business. It's not making money. You're just investing on the greater fool theory that you hope someone else comes along and wants it even more than you do and pays more than you did. So I was like, okay, well, crypto businesses, the businesses that serve the crypto economy, are also listed. You can get these crypto businesses in ETFs. And I thought, okay, sure. It's currently negative 60%. So that's like great for me. So it was, I guess, kind of an index fund, but not really. It was too sector specific. So stick with what I always write about and not what I actually did, which is broad-based, multi-sector index funds. And yeah, I've learned from that, and I get to see the negative 60% every time I log into my account if I ever think I might forget that mistake. My big tip actually is not so much investing, although investing is fantastic, and I do think everyone should invest whatever they can, even if it's $5. But my big thing is invest in your knowledge as well, and take that time to books, podcasts, events like this, because the great thing about knowledge is when things happen, like the economy inevitably goes down, or you make a poor choice like investing in crypto businesses, you look at that and you think, well, I know what happened there, and then you can make a rational decision about it. You're not being guided by panic, you're not being guided by emotion. Emotion and money just never mix, and when you know more, then you can keep that emotion at bay and make a smarter decision. And so always invest in yourself, invest in your knowledge. And if you're listening to me say that, then you're already a step ahead, because you are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Frances. And I think that leads into really a conversation. Next topic I want to have a look at is around obstacles and what obstacles women are facing in terms of, moving to a state of financial well-being, a state of financial wellness. And Frances, lucky you're getting picked on because I'm going to stay with you now. Staying with you, what are some of the obstacles women are facing when it comes to specifically investing, and what can be done?
One of the big things is being paid enough to invest.
Yeah.
I mean, the pay gap is a huge reality and a pain. And it's going to be more difficult to invest if you don't have any spare money to invest. Because, of course, first you have to keep a roof over your head and food on the table. And you might have kids and you might need to take a break from work. And all of this just makes it hard to find that money to invest. I think we can be realistic about that challenge without being defeated by it, and that is a fine line to walk. But you want to always make sure you're hounding your bosses for a pay rise. Sorry to my bosses, but I'm on them all the time. But also if it's just $5 a week that you can find from your budget, great. That is so much better than $0 a week. That will still compound, that will still grow. And if you can up it to $10, sweet. Don't look at it as $10, you just doubled your investing allowance. It's great. Yeah. Take those wins where you can, make headway when you can, while still being realistic about those obstacles, because they're there. Yeah, we don't want to be defeated.
They are there. And I mean, an obstacle that I learned about quite recently was the whole concept of pink tax. And that is, being a woman, we pay more for the equivalent product that a man would pay for. And that whole thing around pink tax, I did not turn pink, I turned red when I just read more and more about it. And I just accepted it as it was the way it was. It's just simply the way it was. And yeah, I mean, it is an obstacle. It is something that we obviously really do need to move beyond and find that equality. Mary, you have seen women's investing change, I would imagine,
over a few years.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would imagine you've seen it.
And by the way, the pink tax, haircuts. I mean,
yes.
Men pay about a quarter of what we pay for a haircut. Why? Yeah. But obstacles. I mean, one thing I really worry about is women who let the man, and I want to say let the man, and if they've got a partner, let the man run the money. And sometimes the woman says, oh, well, I'll pay the bills and the groceries and that, but the guy can do the investing. And I met a woman recently who said to me just quietly, look, I want to get out of my marriage, but I don't really understand our money situation. I think he's put quite a lot of it into family trusts, etc. And I don't even know, so I don't feel I can really leave. And I thought, this is so disempowering. It's really awful. And investing is not hard. You can do it very simply. Please don't think the guy can do it and that you'll just run the daily money. Please don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember when I was working at a bank, and I'll never forget, there was a woman who came in and she had thought that her husband had taken care of all the finances and he'd passed on, only to realize there was no life policy, there was no savings, there was nothing. And that is a good 20 years ago, and I've never forgotten that woman's face.
Yeah.
I've never forgotten that. So yes, it is very important to be aware of what's happening in your marriage or partnership and money and etc. To Kahukura, I am curious to know about your obstacles and solutions. I'm curious to know about your obstacles and solutions to those obstacles.
Yeah, I, for one, think that finding accessible resources when you're learning about investing is quite difficult. And when we look at Māori in particular, we have lower literacy rates, so it's harder to find accessible resources that make sense, that are easy to incorporate in our life. So finding a way forward through that is really important. Finding those that you can relate to, that you can talk to about investing, is really helpful. So if you are with your friends or whatever, try making like a club, like a Sunday breakfast club, where you talk about money, or where you research something and then you guys can break it down together, because it's hard finding resources that you can actually use, but if you do it together, then it's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah, that power of connection.
Yeah,
yes,
100%.
yeah. And I mean, I'm just picking up a theme on what I'm hearing now, is the importance of building our education, our knowledge base. And what you were saying is building that with people, with friends and people that you relate to is very important. They say if you want to go to gym, have a buddy to go to gym with. If you want to work with your buddy, have a buddy to do that with. And Sarah, from your side, what are some of the obstacles that you've observed and solutions?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone here listens to One Up, but if you do, you'll know that something I consider to be really, really important is the sharing of ideas and having different perspectives, and kind of collecting what I call breadcrumbs from each person's story, and a little bit of value here and a little bit of value there. And so something that I think is so important for women especially, and for minorities and marginalised communities as well, is representation of voices. And to Kahukura's point, that brings accessibility to information, but it's also going to bring a wide variety of experiences. Not all of our experiences are going to be the same. I personally only speak from my experience, which is one life, and only some people are going to relate to that, and only some people are going to relate to parts of that. So the more voices we can have talking about things, I think that's where we will see people feeling like, I can do that too. And you hear the simple versions of the story when women see women who are talking about investing and they think, okay, yes, now I can do it. And it's going to be the same for the more specific types of people, or getting into the nitty gritty of this experience or that experience. So yeah, I see representation in all forms to be a really, really key part of bringing in that accessibility to financial literacy and overcoming those obstacles.
Yes, fantastic. And I think it is very important, and to Kahukura, and I was speaking about it beforehand, is the importance of seeing ourselves. When we see ourselves, we can connect. And so I think it is, what you're saying is incredibly powerful, and I think it's actually a bedrock statement on how we can further financial empowerment among women. More women. So thank you very much. So the next thing I want to chat about, and this is something I've got a serious passion about, and I know I've chatted to Frances on her podcast about it, and I've chatted to you, Sarah, on yours, and I know Mary had it in her book, and I know Kahukura has also spoken about it. That is the motivations behind our behaviors, how we interact with money. There's so many things that are going on in the back end, our biases, etc., that are playing in the back end. And I really enjoyed Frances, whose description in her one book is about buying stuff and hiding it from her husband. I've done that, I must admit. I've hidden it the husband. I've hidden it. And the problem is he's found it, and then he's been more upset about me hiding it. Then it's a whole debate within itself. But really, our whole motivations and our relationship behind money is, we do work on it, but yet there is so much money invested in advertising. There are entire industries that exist with the whole idea of parting you from your money. This is it. And I'm keen to hear what your approach is to resisting this temptation, and I'm keen to hear if your budget plays a role in helping you. So starting off, to Kahukura, what is your approach to resisting temptation? And how does your budget help or hinder you in doing that?
Yeah, so I definitely budget for the fun things in life. I think that if Clearly the dieting one hasn't worked for me, but I like to implement what gym bunnies would do, and it's like, having one treat. So I like to, have a treat once a week or something like that I budget for. So whether it's getting my nails done, getting a massage, I plan for it so that I can do it, and then I don't feel bad about doing it. But also having non-financial treats is another big one. So, whether that's a day in the sun or a day at the beach, things that don't cost money that can still bring you just as much enjoyment. But overall, I practice value-based spending. So if it's going to provide value for me, then I'm happy to part my money for it. So books is an example. I love reading. So I'll happily spend $40 on a book. But if it's something else that I don't really value, then I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think that value-based spending is so important. Buyer's remorse. Oh, everybody knows the pain of buyer's remorse, and I actually experienced it quite recently. It wasn't the size of the money, it was the fact that I'd spent it. So yeah, value-based spending is a very powerful thing. Mary, tell us a little bit about your approach to resisting temptation to spend and how your budget plays into it.
Well, this is going to sound awful, but I don't like shopping. And
Lovely.
And so I don't like, I call it the unsupermarket,
Yes.
because it's not super. And I can't bear malls. I rush in and get whatever I absolutely have to get and rush out again. So I wanted to take a quick opportunity to talk about women who spend too little, because there are actually, and I get letters from, and men who, they're kind of the opposite to the mainstream, and they budget really tightly. They're a bit too nervous and go into retirement quite often with, a heck of a lot of savings, and then are reluctant to buy the nice jam in the supermarket or whatever. And so, but that's no excuse for most women or men to say, oh, I don't spend enough on me. The people who are like that really know they're like that. They're people who are really kind of mean on themselves, and it's a good idea to think about that and how that's not a good way to do it either.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else in the room, but I really do remember, I remember my mom being one of those people that could stretch $1, made it elastic.
Yes.
And her big thing was she had found herself in a situation where she'd been too reliant on a man for too long. Yeah. And she found herself in a situation where she had to start from scratch. And that pain of starting from scratch, she was, as you said, didn't spend money on anything, stretched that dollar, well, in my case, the rand, stretched the rand as far as it could go. So, yeah, definitely that one. So tell me a little bit, Frances, I'm very curious to know how you resist being a recovered hot mess, and I'm very keen to know how you resist the temptation to spend.
Well, very similarly to the values-based spending, right? Like, my big rule is a budget only exists for making your life better, right? That's what it's here for, that you are trying to build a life that fits your values. Yes. It's not a competition for who can be the most deprived. So my big thing is, whenever someone's trying to hit reset, I recommend this because it really worked for me. Keep a money diary at least a week, longer if you can. Sometimes a little confronting, so a week is a good place to start. And then everything that you spend, every single thing, even if it's $2, did you have to spend it? And did it make you happy? And the did it make you happy is also a really important one that shouldn't be underestimated. There will be stuff on there that didn't do either. And that's super easy. You can cut it. Once you've got it there in black and white, you're like, why am I spending that? I can go. But then you look at the stuff that you have to spend, and you look at the stuff that's making you happy, and you just take a moment and you think, well, is there a smarter version of this? And a big one for me is 2020. I did not know that was going to be a challenging enough year as it was. It was January. It was March before everything fell apart. So January, I set myself the New Year resolution of I'm only going to buy secondhand clothes this year, because I wish I didn't like shopping. I really do. I can spend hours in a mall. So I thought, well, I'm spending far too much on clothes. This is totally ludicrous. My poor husband is allowed 2 hangers in our wardrobe. Sometimes it gets shunted down to 1. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to do secondhand clothing this year. And I tell you what, I've never gone back. Almost all of my clothes are secondhand now because I really enjoyed it. And I spend a fraction of what I used to. And I think once you've got everything down in black and white and you see the spending that is actually making you happy and you want to keep it and you think, is there a smarter way I can do this? There are ways. And then you're still keeping quality of life because that's so important. Life's too short.
It is. Life is too short, definitely. And Sarah, I'm very curious to hear from you now. How do you resist temptation? I know we spoke about it, but I'm keen to hear it again.
Yeah, there's two things that I'm kind of thinking of, and I can't even remember this is what I originally said, but it's the first thing that's sort of coming to mind now. When I was younger and I had the luxury of going on holiday with my family, which was always amazing, my dad used to always repeat the same thing, which was, we don't go on holiday to save money. And that's kind of something that's stuck with me when I've gone on holiday. It's like, I don't want to feel guilty spending this money. And when I go and buy something for myself, I don't want to be thinking, oh, do I have to? I want to spend it confidently knowing that that is what I want and I've put money aside for that. And so that's how I budget value-based spending, making sure that I actually plan out the things that I know that I want. So when I go to spend that money, I don't feel guilty doing it. But my practical tip, which is kind of unrelated to this, is that I'm a huge believer in ignorance is bliss, and unfollowing Instagram accounts of your favorite brands, like unsubscribing from emails and all that kind of stuff actually works. Like, I promise you. I'll always compare, well, I won't actually compare, but if I'm thinking about my friends' spending habits versus mine and who we're like choosing to follow on social media and engage with, I can tell that because they're reminded constantly of something they don't have, and this goes for comparison generally on social media, of course, as well, you want that thing and you feel tempted to get it. And I think the less you tempt yourself and like put in those boundaries for yourself, the more successful you'll be in actually like actioning those boundaries. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, no, that the whole thing around our behavior, and a very big tip is just the most simple thing is to become aware of our behavior. So as you say, when you're scrolling through Instagram and you see an advert and you want to click through to it, just to understand why you want to click through to it. What is it that you want to get from this, and is it going to add value? So yeah, but like many millions spent on trying to get us to part with our hard-earned money. And these four amazing women are obviously very different parts on their financial journey. And what I want to do now is I want to take a little bit of time and I want to ask each of them, what would be one thing you would like to share with women at the same stage of life as you? So I'm going to start off with Kahukura. What would be the one piece of information you'd give to women in their late teens?
Yeah, I would say in your late teens, forging a pathway or, creating your plan for what you want in the future is really important. So setting your goals is really important. And then once you've got your goals, creating a plan for that. So my personal goal is to be a millionaire by 25. And what I've done for that is breaking down the goal by each year incrementally and actually figuring out what can I do this year? What can I achieve this month even? That's going to help me achieve that goal in the long run, because it's cool to have big goals, but if you don't have a plan, you're not going to achieve them. So once you've got your plan, making sure that you're very strict on yourself to actually meet those, but also acknowledging that, life happens and accepting that if things take longer than you first anticipated, to accept that and just kind of go with the journey is one thing I would definitely say.
Fantastic, thank you, Sarah. For those of us in our 20s,
Of course.
So, for those of us in our 20s, what would be one piece of advice, or not advice, one piece of wisdom that you would share?
Yeah, I think I kind of went into it a little bit in my last answer actually, but it was just feeling like you can do the things that you want and spend guilt-free and not feel like you have to be doing this because you're now 25 and that means you should own a home in Auckland and all this kind of thing. And like, it feels like you have to do all of these things and like you have to do this and you have to do that. You don't have to do anything. Like, I think knowing that you have chosen what you actually want for your life and then building a plan towards it is going to be the thing that's actually going to make you happy. And I feel like I had to come to terms with this when I was traveling and feeling like everyone else was doing all these things, but I didn't want to do those things. And I felt so guilty for feeling like I wasn't doing it right. but our perception of what is right and wrong isn't black and white, but it feels that way. And so I think, you know, understanding yourself to know what you actually want out of life and then building the plan towards it is kind of my thoughts on that. And I'm still working on that myself as well.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
Frances, for those of us in our 30s. For those of us in our 30s, what would be one thing you would share about, you would like to share with women?
So I think your 30s for a lot of women, and certainly this is the case for me, you feel pulled in a million different directions at once. You know, I have a baby, I have a house and a mortgage I've got to pay, which I know that's a problem a lot of people would like to have. But it is still sometimes a problem when interest rates go up. You know, I have a husband, I have a very demanding career. It's a lot, right? And I think that I'm far from alone in that. A lot of women are dealing with that. Someone once said to me, your 20s are about learning, your 30s are about earning. Sometimes it can be 30s and 40s, but it's a key compounding time of life, right? If you are able to stack some cash at this point and you get it invested and you get it working for you, it's then got a few decades to make a massive difference without you working as hard for it. So there's a lot going on, there's a lot of balance, but if you can try to get to that point where you can stack some cash and just get it into the market and get it working for you, that's massive. And if I can just also squeak in an extra one, I'm here today because my husband started work early and he's picking up the baby from daycare, and that lets me be here. And I think if you can't find a partner who is prepared to be your equal, you're often better off alone. Slightly controversial, don't want to be negative, but it is a reality that sometimes if you can't find someone who will work with you and treats your goals as just as important as theirs, they're going to hold you back. And you don't want that. So you can also have those conversations where you can get someone to step up and be your equal as well. So I think that's massive, putting it out there.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Frances. And for Mary, for those of us who are north of 40, I
was wondering what you were going to say.
North of 40. What would be one piece of wisdom you'd share?
I think women tend to be too conservative in their investments, especially as they get closer to retirement. You hear women putting it all in low-risk funds, low-risk KiwiSaver funds, or even bank term deposits, all their savings. Now, many people, let's say you retire at 65, you're going to live 30 more years. A lot of people are living into their 90s these days. And so the money that you're going to spend from like 85 to 95 or even 75 to 85 can be still left in high-risk KiwiSaver funds, are a really good place to put it. It'll grow much more than if you put it in this low-risk stuff. Women tend to be better investors in that we don't trade frequently. We get into stuff and stay in there, and that's by far a smarter thing to do. But on the other hand, we're too timid, and a whole lot of women are just not taking enough risks with their investments, including in older age. It's a pity. One more quick thing, reverse mortgages when you're 85 or 90. They're not a great idea when you're younger, but if you own your own house, mortgage-free, you're sitting on this huge asset, and if you don't borrow the money against the house until 85 or 90, then you can happily spend the money. The interest will accumulate, but doesn't matter much because you're probably not going to live more than 20 more years from now. If you don't know about reverse mortgages, have a look at them. Not so good when in early retirement, but a great idea when you're in later retirement. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I really feel there's actually so much more to say, but time is not with us, and I still really want to have time for questions and answers. It'd be fantastic to engage. So if I may ask, we're going to do questions and answers, but if I can ask that we just give this exceptional panel just a warm round of applause. So I'm going to take questions and answers. If there's someone specific you want to target your question to, please say so. Please say so. Otherwise, I'm going to go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So first question, Who has got a question? Oh. First question? All silence.
Don't be a bunch of women.
Yes.
Come on.
Oh, lovely. Yes, yes. Your name? Lovely, Kitty. Do you have a question for anyone specific?
We could have compounded. Oh, sorry. What do you think of the 70s and 80s when the super scheme was scrapped after 37 weeks? And also the fact Australia has 10.5% contributions and we only get 3, and they're going to 12% soon. What can we do about it?
Yeah, so the scrapping of New Zealand super, that's happened a few different times in history. Ideas have come up and been squashed. It was a pity, and we've got KiwiSaver now, so let's look forward and make the most of KiwiSaver, which, you know, employees are more than double their money's going in, and so more than double their money's coming out. Not everyone understands that. If you've got twice as much going in, instead of retiring with 100,000, you retire with 200,000. It's as simple as that. And now, what was the other thing you were asking about? Oh, Australia versus New Zealand. Australia, they put so much into their super that people are retiring and then taking their super money to pay off their mortgage. I mean, it's been overdone in some ways, I think. It's good in New Zealand if people save more than, say, 3% of their pay into KiwiSaver, probably. But we can overdo that too. So I wouldn't look over the Tasman and be too envious of it, actually. Well, there's not enough time to go into detail, but KiwiSaver is pretty good. What we're doing here now is pretty good. Yeah. So be thankful for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Microphone here, please. Sorry, I forgot about the microphone the first time round.
Kia ora all. Te Kahukura, I've got a question for you. How and where did you get your influences? I always say that you're going to be the person who gets an OBE before you're 30 because you're such a leader, and particularly in intergenerational wealth and that conversation. And yeah, where did you get your inspiration from? Did you just naturally evolve to become this boss leader? I mean, I'm kind of jealous because I just don't have it within me, so I love it.
In all honesty, my mum and my nan have been the biggest influences in my life. And whilst they're not, financially, they've taught me the skills that I needed to be able to make finances a habit. So things like tenacity, or things like manaakitanga, or looking after others, and values and things like that. And those are things that I could easily transfer with some of the other financial influencers who I didn't relate to. I could transfer those things that I learned from them into the finance world, and that helped me to kind of use those thoughts to influence how I was investing and things like that. So, for example, my mum and my nan were both school teachers, and they always encouraged us to read all the time. I wasn't allowed to watch TV during the week, and so I was told, if you're bored, go read a book. And so I would go and read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was little, and things like that. So those are, my mum and my nan are the biggest influences in my life.
Fantastic. Next question. In the green. Oh, okay. Yes, you first, and then there. Yes, please go ahead.
Afternoon, ladies. Thank you very much for all your contributions today, and on Instagram and online too. I thoroughly enjoy all of your accounts. One of the questions I have is, I think for women, often, the cliche saying of empowered women empower women, right? Not that we need that empowerment, but it is the way it goes. And so for, I think really the question came from your comment, Mary, about how conservative women tend to be. And I think without sort of shoving ideals down your friends' throats or trying to kind of win people over when they're not ready, do any of you have any advice for, I guess, those of us who are really passionate about talking about this, and you can see your really good friends who are so resistant to even having the conversations, and really just kind of having those very low risk things, which I want to do really great things with them when we're much older. And I can see that that might not be the trajectory that they'll be able to join along. So just bringing everyone up together is my question.
Fantastic. Anybody would like to take that?
Yep, jump on that one. I think it's really tricky, right? Because you've discovered this world of the difference that you can make with sometimes quite small changes to your money, and you want to let everyone know that they could be living their lives in a way that, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't think it made people's lives better. So you want to tell everyone about it. And it's so tricky because talking to people about money, you don't even have to be judgmental. People just feel judged. There's a whole lot of projection that happens there so fast. And so the way that I personally approach it is I think the only way you can do it is to live your best life as openly as you can and let people know about the decisions you're making and how it has impacted your quality of life. And then if they want to talk to you about it, if they have questions, they're going to ask because the conversation has been started. And if they don't want to have that conversation, unfortunately, we have to respect that. It's going to sound harsh, but if other people want to mess up their lives, that's their choice. And it's really, really hard, especially if it's someone you love and care about and you want to see them living a better quality of life. But that is the only way I've found that it works. But I do think that when you're living your best life and being open and having conversations, and even something like, you know, if you work alongside people who you really get along with and you say, I'm getting paid this much, just FYI, you know? And I think that can be, you don't have to say any more than that. That can be a great thing. So you can just live an open life, try to live your values, be open to when those conversations start.
Can I add on to that?
Of course.
Sorry, I just also want to say, because I kind of deal with the same thing with my friend group where I feel like, I don't think any of them are here today, where I feel like they, even 2 years after starting the podcast and kind of being more open about financial literacy, only then did one of my friends come to me and say, could you help me with my budget? Could you, you know, I'm kind of like struggling a little bit. And I think about that now and I'm like, where does that come from? And I'm like, a lot of it is this insecurity, you know, and this fear that we're going to get things wrong and that someone's going to judge us. And I think I always like to start with validating that it's okay to feel that way about whatever it is, the situation, and kind of not giving any advice, just continuing on the validation, because what you want to build with that person is the trust. Even if you are best friends and you do trust each other, but they feel that with something as vulnerable as their money, that they trust you to not judge them and to give them your kind of thoughts. So I kind of approach it where I like to try and validate as much as possible, and hopefully within that time enough trust builds up that they feel like I am someone they could come to, and regardless of, you know, I'm no millionaire or financial whiz, but because I talk about it, they think that I have this perception of how things should be and they're not like that. And so once you build up that trust with them and continue to tell them it's okay, I think over time it starts to develop, as opposed to bringing up like, hey, have you tried this, or hey, have you tried that? Because my friends know they should be investing. They know they should be doing all these things, but it's not going to like motivate them to do it. But yeah, it's a hard struggle. I also find it in my friend group as well.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so Frances, you talked about stashing the cash in your kind of earning stage of your life. How does that compare to paying down mortgage debt, and how do you find a kind of balance there, or what's your advice there?
Oh, so mortgage versus investing? That one is such a fiery debate. And even financial advisors disagree about this all the time. So I think the big thing is that there's not a right answer. And also there's not a right answer for a lot of money questions. It's going to depend on what brings value to your life. So for one thing, it may or may not be that you have a mortgage in your 30s, and that's, you know, fine. If you do have a mortgage, where I personally land on it is the smartest thing financially, if you just look at the numbers, is often to pay off the mortgage, because you'll be saving more on debt over the 30 years or 20 years if you're smarter or whatever. You'll be saving more on debt by paying that off faster than you make off investments, usually. But the problem is human behavior, because we tend to pay off a certain amount and then we upgrade the house, or we renovate, or we take the foot off the gas, and in that time you're missing all the compounding of investments. So I like to have a bob each way, where you might pay off a little bit extra on the mortgage, and you also are investing into index funds or whatever, and it might be less than if you were focusing just on one thing or the other, but as we often talk about in investing, diversification. So this is just another great way to diversify your money. That's where I land on it, but people will disagree.
We moved countries, moved here quite recently, and what we've done, and this is our journey, is exactly what Francis said, is that we've got a mortgage, but we need to also benefit from the compound interest of KiwiSaver so that we actually have something when we retire. So we're at the moment desperately trying to tackle both, trying to invest and trying to pay down the mortgage. Yeah, so no. Yes, there's a question there.
Kia ora, hello. This is a question for either Francis or Mary. Maybe Mary, because Francis, you've been talking. Sorry. I read all your books, Mary, big fan. But my question is, how do I deal with, so I was on track to paying off my mortgage by the time I'm 40. But I've got a big wobble in my life at the moment where I've lost 4 kids, and we are on our 3rd round of IVF, which is bloody expensive. And yeah, so it's just, we're in the midst of this giant financial wobble. And how do people climb back up? And it is a very female problem because, nobody knows child loss as, unless you're a woman. So yeah, how do you rebound from what this deep pit I am in right now, and become the more risk-taking version of me that I used to be? I'm very risk-averse at the moment. I'm the only person wearing a mask in the whole room, and yeah, I think maybe hormones might explain why we are so risk-averse as women, especially in our age. And yeah, so how do we overcome that risk aversion and become more risk-taking, I guess?
I would say, first of all, be kind to yourself.
Yes.
You've had a really hard time, and don't worry about investing at the moment and how much risk you're taking. Give yourself some time. If you were heading for paying off a mortgage by 40, that's terrific. And there's not that many people in this room who've done that well. So move that goal to paying it off by 50, and be gentle on yourself at the moment, and don't worry about the financial stuff. Go for walks on the beach, get into the bush or something like that, and just relax and be good to yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that as well? I just really want to agree with what Mary said, that there is so much more in life than money. I know we're here to talk about money, but if you stress yourself out in the pursuit of it, it's not going to be worth it. It's going to be such a hollow victory. So if you can take a pause and just give yourself a bit of grace, you've got time, you're going to be fine. Let yourself focus on what you need to and give yourself a clear head.
One more question. Come forward. Oh, we just wait for the microphone to make the. There we go.
I don't have so much of a question, but I'm just thinking about young women today. They're exposed to so much advertising constantly from such a young age, especially girls, I find. How can we help young women to sort of balance that exposure to constant spending and balancing out their knowledge with saving and getting into saving money? I got teenagers at home, and it worries me how much they're exposed to advertising, and yeah, so that's my
specific on the panel wants to tackle that. Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one because I'm trying to think about myself personally. When we spoke about spending before, and how my kind of solution to that has been ignorance is bliss and removing that. But then the person needs to actively make that decision, because if I'm to tell someone, hey, you should take that off your social media, it's impacting your mental health, they're going to be like, you know, you don't know me, you don't know, kind of thing. And it really does need to come from the person. And I think like there's also a part of that that's like having an awareness that it is impacting you at all, which sometimes people don't have. And it's something I've only recently realized, is how much I was comparing myself to people on social media and like having to kind of take some of that out of my life. And it's weird that I've only kind of just realized that recently. So I think to support someone through kind of that stage in their life where there are so many influences is to live those values that you want them to have through yourself, and to, you know, I don't need this to be this, so that person gets inspired by you not needing that thing to be this thing. You know, for example, you need this to be pretty, or this to be financially independent, or this to be whatever. And them to constantly learn from those around them by like osmosis, as opposed to being told, I think is probably something that helped me a lot, and like having those influences around me.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to have a mix of people.
Yes.
And that's really good.
Are your girls or teenagers in KiwiSaver?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how about setting up an automatic transfer of $5 a week or $5 a month for them, going in there, and then encouraging them to watch the progress that happens from that growing?
Totally agree. It worries me, the power of the advertising that's constant. It's really, they get into something, and as soon as they get it, they're on to the next. And it's, I think, is that constant feeds.
Yeah, that is a sorry. I'm going to invite you to catch up afterwards. I'm just very aware of time, ladies and gentlemen. This marks the end of the Q&A. If we'd just like to give our fantastic panelists just another round of applause. I will invite our panelists to take a seat, to return to your seats. And at this time, I'd like to please welcome back our CEO, Samantha Barris, to do the closing.
Well, I'm going to remember to speak into the microphone from the word go. Wow. What an amazing series of conversations we've been having today, and just a few sort of closing remarks from me, which can't possibly do justice to the conversation that we've been having. I mean, I was scribbling down loads of notes as we were talking. There were some things for me that were sort of really powerful that came out from this. One was the huge acknowledgement that we're human beings, and that there are things that we like to do, and the importance of the importance of really being able to control our financial destiny. That was very, and how do we do that? Whether it's through budgeting, the point about the emergency fund or the savings fund, incredibly well made. I think that, being able to, no matter how small, no matter how much you sort of put aside, I think in terms of well-being for women to have an emergency fund, for all the sorts of reasons that we might need one. But also there was some really interesting discussion around the way that we experience money throughout our lives. So it's around controlling our destiny, and then also being thoughtful and mindful in the way that we experience money and the things that money can provide throughout our lives. And I thought, Mary, you began to take us into the experience of older women, which I think is a really interesting theme that's worthy of further exploration. I'm probably not the only older woman in the room that's already being a bit mindful about, well, actually, should I feel guilty or not if I want to spend everything, all of my assets before I die, which I'm hoping won't be till I'm about 105. Or should I actually be sitting on everything, being very tight in the way that I spend money so that I can pass it on to my kids? Those are some very real, those are some very real issues for older women. I think being free, thinking less conservatively about the way that you invest. I think there's some, it's very, very important points there. And I loved we also had some emotional discussion around, value-based spending. Does it make you happy? I think it's a great question to ask, and I hadn't really thought about it in that sense. That's certainly one of the things that I'm going to take from today, but also don't be too timid. I had the jam, but buying that extra expensive jar of jam, it actually brought me. I grew up in quite a family that really needed to budget, and I always bought the value jam. And I remember the first time I bought a jar of Bon Maman jam from Tesco's, and it felt really naughty to be able. And I thought, why am I feeling like this? Because actually, I can now afford the Bon Maman jam and not the cheap jam. So I think some real themes from there. But I'm particularly thoughtful on the position on older women, and I think that's something that's worth taking forward. Quite often our discussions will focus on the very real challenges that younger women face in what is an ever complex world. But let us not forget, at the other end of our lives, we've also got needs that need to be met. So I can't possibly cover everything at all, but just I would like to draw your attention to the investor resources that the FMA have got on our site. If you go to fma.gov.New Zealand or follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you can follow the FMA on Facebook and Instagram and avoid those advertisements trying to get you to spend money on things that will not make you happy. And finally, I'd like to thank Tammy for steering us so ably through the discussion today. Mary, to Kahukura, Sarah and Francis, thank you very much for your time and very, very enjoyable discussion today.